morning, everybody. We're delighted to be here to talk about this very important topic. I've been in education for over 33 years, and I've never seen anything like the behaviors our youngest children are bringing to school with them. It seemed to happen just the last couple of years. And as we dive down to try and figure out what's causing all these behaviors, we're learning more and more about childhood trauma. So my intent today is to talk to you about what's happening in our schools. What does the manifestation of trauma look like in school? And then I'd like to define trauma. And then as I'm going through all of that, I ask that you think about the fact that schools were neither funded nor designed to deal with this huge wave of behaviors that we're dealing with. And then, clearly we need more help. And so that's where Marissa comes in. We hired Marissa this past year to work within the community to connect our families with community resources, and that's been really important to help some of our families in need, the children from trauma. And then one of the best things that I believe that we can do to help our youngest children overcome trauma was done through our relationship with the faith community, and this is Pastor Casey, and he will speak to that. So this is what trauma looks like in an elementary school. One day I'm walking down the hallway, and in this little nook I see a boy banging his head against this wall and punching himself in the face, self-harm. And there was a teacher kneeling next to him trying to de-escalate him. And I know that this teacher was from somewhere else in the building. I also know that something happened in that classroom that caused this little boy to be put out into the hallway. So there was an emotional escalation in that classroom for both the teacher and the children. But again, that teacher that was helping this little boy in the hallway, she had a job to do as well, and it wasn't getting done. Another day I'm walking down the hallway and I see a little guy on the floor, ironically underneath the safety sign, having a tantrum. Now we've had tantrums ever since we've had children, but I'm talking about the tantrums that are caused by trauma. So the principal was standing over this little guy, and I walked up to her and she sighed and said, "Third time this week." And I know how these things go. I know that she's going to have to wait for the tantrum to stop. She's going to have to figure out how to get him into her office, call the parents, bring the parents in, process what happened, change behavior plans, all of that stuff. And that will likely take anywhere from 1 to 3 hours. And if that's happening 3 times a week, how is that principal to provide the best instructional leadership she possibly can for that building? And another day I'm walking down the hallway and I hear the crack of a radio, and immediately there's 4 people with radios in the hallway running to another location in the school. They were going down to apply a restraint to a child who had gotten physically aggressive. So we have people that are trained that know how to do that. They safely put children in restraints, and if those children don't de-escalate, then they're taken to a seclusion room, and this is a picture of our seclusion room, where the child is put in until he de-escalates. And then once that child de-escalates, then we go through processing, bringing the parents in, all of that. And so in this instance that I'm talking about, there were probably 6 or 7 adults involved with that child at least for an hour, many of them for up to 3 hours. And those people all had a job to do that wasn't getting done. Perhaps the saddest form of trauma that we're seeing in our schools is suicidal ideation. It's particularly significant in our high schools. We had to send a student to the emergency room in an ambulance this year from our high school because of suicidal ideation. This is a picture of some monkey bars in one of our elementary playgrounds. A 5th grader tried to hang himself before school one day. So he was seen. He was escorted into the office. Mom was brought in. We did a risk assessment and determined that he did in fact want to end his life. Mom tried to minimize the situation. We said, no, you need to take him to the emergency room for a mental health assessment from a professional. And so Marissa was there, and she was able to talk Mom into doing that. And the mental health professional deemed that the child did want to take his life. And so he was processed within the system from there. Other manifestations of trauma that we're seeing in school are extreme profanity, over-sexualization. We have seen some of the craziest things coming from kindergarten students. threats of sexual violence that, I've heard kids saying things like, I never dreamed would come out of anyone's mouth. And then, of course, there's anxiety and depression, which really aren't outward manifestations of trauma, but they're very significant and impact the ability for those children to learn. And then there's residual trauma. So here's what I mean by residual trauma. A fellow superintendent told me the story of a little boy who was brought to the office to wait for his dad to take him to the dentist. So while this little boy is waiting for his dad, another student was brought into the office who was having a meltdown. Profanity, violence, throwing things, and this little boy is watching that. Dad comes, the principal escorts the little boy out to his dad, and the little boy is shaking. That's residual trauma. Think about that elementary classroom that I started with, where the kid had the meltdown, he was put into the hallway. Those people, the other children and that teacher experienced residual trauma. We had one of the best kindergarten teachers I have ever known retire early because of residual trauma this year. So, what is trauma? I'm sure that most of you have been exposed to the ACEs study, Adverse Childhood Experiences. This is what we're talking about when we mean trauma. And there's been a lot of research done on this, and the research states that the more of these you experience as a child, the more likely you're going to have physical problems, health problems as an adult. To make that point, this is data from Muskegon County that was done by Health West a couple of years ago. They surveyed about 2,000 middle-class, mostly Caucasian people, and they asked these people, did any of these things happen to you when you were a child? And only 26% of them out of 2,000 said, no, none of those things happened to me. But look at the national average. And then look at 4+ ACEs. So if I have 4+ ACEs, this might have happened to me. I may have been in a home with an alcoholic father who beat me. As a result, wound up in jail and is incarcerated, and mom divorced him. That's 4 ACEs. You can see that we double the number of people in Muskegon County that have 4 or more ACEs. We also know that Muskegon County has some of the worst health outcomes in the state of Michigan for children and adults. This may be part of the reason why. So trauma doesn't just impact children emotionally, it impacts them physiologically and anatomically. So here's a brain scan of a normal brain. Here's a brain scan of a child who's experienced tremendous trauma. Part of that child's brain has not developed, and the part that doesn't develop deals with emotional regulation and problem solving. And so when these children are exposed to some kind of stimuli that would be normal for most people, they go off, and they don't know how to come back. So, like I said, schools have neither been funded nor designed to deal with this issue. These children do not answer to normal discipline. We need to think outside the box. We need to think differently as to how we work with them. And I know you at Nelson have a lot of these issues. And we're Fruitport. And I know Spring Lake has them, Whitehall has them, we all have them. So, as is clear, we need more help. And so I mentioned that we hired Marissa through a grant, and she's a licensed counselor and she understands the system. I don't understand the system, and whenever I tried to help families find resources to help a child in need, it was extremely frustrating for me. So Marissa was able to blast through all of that bureaucracy and get kids the help that they needed. So Marissa, why don't you take a minute and talk about some of your work?
Sure. So as Bob said, my connection was really between the school and parents. So we feel that to help kids, we have to help the parent as well, and we could have impact there. Typically the way that it would work is a kiddo would be identified by school staff, and that's how they would be referred to me. So it could be a number of things that they felt like the child needed, whether it be through the behaviors that they're seeing in the classroom, or needs like they needed eyeglasses and weren't coming to school with them, or have been off their medications and they weren't sure why. That's how a referral would come to me, and then I would be that connection to the parent. So I would schedule a home visit, go meet with the family, the parent, and I would talk to them about social determinants of health. We would do a screening with them, and really figure out what was going on in the home and how we could help support them there. So I'll give you 2 stories of what that kind of looked like with 2 of the kiddos. So one of them was a first grader in one of our elementary school buildings, and he was having some of the behaviors that Bob described as far as like the tantrums and the physical aggression. So I went and met with parents and was able to go through that social determinants of health screening, and they shared that they needed support with food resources, so I was able to get them plugged in to that, as well as help stabilize things within the home. So we did things like visual routine charts. We talked to them about the importance of sleep, and talked about bedtime routines, so that would help support the child there, as well as building on those parent-child relationships. Another example was an older student. He was, I believe, in 5th grade, and he just had experienced the loss of his mother. So dad and child with limited family support were just trying to figure out life without mom. So I was able to go in there and do that same type of screening with them, and it came out that they didn't have any medical insurance. Dad was unemployed, and never, sought out supports from grief counseling, those types of things. So I was able to sit with them, help dad go through the online application to get Medicaid and food supports, and get them plugged in with Health West to help meet the kiddos' needs, because he was also referred due to behaviors that he was having at school. So those were 2 of the stories that I've worked with families and what my work looked like with them.
Marissa's work has been awesome. She's really made a tremendous impact on our schools, and we're really grateful for all of that. The more that we've learned about trauma, you're looking for a solution. How do we truly help these children? And what we found is the best way to help these children is through the formation of caring and nurturing relationships with an adult. That's how kids build resilience. Remember those holes in that one child's brain, through these kinds of relationships, those neurons can reconnect and the child can have some sense of recovery from extreme trauma. So this is really important to set up a mentorship program. But where on earth do you find enough adults to address this need? So we thought, let's go to the churches. So Marissa and I did do that, and we spoke at all the congregations of all the churches in Fruitport, and I'm happy to report that lightning didn't strike, because I'm not much of a churchgoer, and I made it in and out of all of them unscathed. But it was really a powerful experience for me to do that. But I stood up in front of the congregations and just spoke for a minute about children from trauma, and said, if you're interested in learning more about these children and would like to help, come to a training. And so Lauren Meldrum from Health West and Systems of Care came out, and she provided the trauma training for these folks, and we had 3 sessions. Here's one of the sessions. And we trained some 90 people in the faith community. So our faith community is becoming trauma informed. And out of that, 35 mentors from the faith community worked with children, and almost to a child, behaviors decreased and academics increased. It was absolutely profound, the impact that caring relationship had on those children. So it's an unusual thing for schools to work so closely with churches, but it's absolutely the right thing. And I think that this barrier between church and state, maybe we need to rethink that. And so to speak to these issues, what it's like to work with a school and also to be a mentor, Pastor Casey.
My name is Casey Arnouts. I'm pastor at Grace Assembly of God. Please don't tell my congregation that these kind of clocks exist. More importantly, I'm a Christian, which means many things, but foundationally it means that my life has to follow a trajectory consistent with Jesus. And fundamental to Jesus is the idea of incarnation, which is that mystery where God came to the world, came to a dark and needy world. He came as a man, and he found ways to love and serve. So if I'm going to be a Christian worthy of the name, it means I'm going to find a place of need. I'm going to find a way to enter that space. I'm going to find a way to love and serve. And so when Bob came to our little informal pastors group and told us about ACEs and just took the time to dream about what a partnership might look like, we were hooked. But as a pastor, I understand that when I'm talking to my congregation, if you don't have a kid in the district, your point of contact with the public schools is millage votes and increasing property taxes. And there are rumors/reports that public schools may be a place at best callous, at worst hostile to people of faith. And so when the pastor gets up there and says, hey, we've got this great opportunity for partnership, polite skepticism is sort of the default. Because they hear me say crazy things all the time, like love your enemies and forgive people and all that kind of stuff. And so I just publicly want to thank Bob and Marissa for their willingness, because these two people took their Sunday mornings and they came to a number of churches and they spoke to the congregations. They were available afterwards for people from our church to ask questions and hear stories. And even though I could never get Bob to tell me who the best preacher was, thanks. No.
You have the best music.
I appreciate that. I'm going to let them know. They're going to be excited. The fact that they were there and could sort of present not only the need to tap into that description of what a Christian is supposed to do, that it gave the imagination for the congregation for me to take advantage of. But the possibility of working so closely together really did fire the imagination of a lot of people. And so it was a privilege to have them and a joy to participate. And I look forward to helping them continue and expand this program into the future. Now, as a mentor, that was a lot of fun. I love my guy. And I'll confess there was a little bit of apprehension when I first went in as a fat 47-year-old white dude. I am not exactly with it as far as youth culture and the immortal words of Grandpa Simpson. I used to be with it, but then they changed what it is, and now what I'm with isn't it. And what's it is weird and scary to me. So I came in, and I was very gratified after the first meeting to be declared a cool dude by my kid, who I consider an authority on the subject. And basically, for an hour a week, we would go in and talk. And he really loved to draw and color. We'd do that. We'd tell stories. On occasion, he would get to process stuff, sometimes sort of Dutch uncle advice and things of that nature. And I'm not wise enough to speak to the causation correlation. I'm gratified to see the improvements, just not smart enough to know. But for me, here's the win. My guy well, you can't identify the face, but this sits on my desk, right with my kids, a picture of my kids and wife. He's charming, he's funny, he's personable, and he's also emotionally underprepared and socially undersupported to be at school, which means that when he gets there, there's going to be trouble. It's all but guaranteed. And so for a kid who comes into this environment, and come on teachers, you're outnumbered, 20-1? So when he starts to act out, you need structure, order, and there's going to have to be something that happens. So at a certain point, you guys are going to become enforcers. And then he's going to go home, and his parents are going to be angry or disappointed, or both. At him, at the school, at both. And so for my little guy, who is ill-equipped to navigate the world that he's been put into, all the adults connected with school have the potential to kind of have a dark dynamic. Because it's just, he's going to be disappointed at home, he's going to feel under suspicion at school. And for me, the win was I got to go to that dark, needy world at least an hour a week, and I was for him. I was in his corner. Didn't matter what he'd done. He could tell me or not. Didn't matter. I got to show him that there are stable, safe, loving adults that are in his corner and on his side. And that part was easy. I mean, we color, we play games. The over-sexualization, I got to sort of push him off the notion that Mountain Dew was some kind of effective birth control. But, the conversations were interesting. The week that I couldn't make it because of another obligation, I made sure a cookie the size of his head showed up in his classroom so that he could feel special in front of his classmates. And on those weeks where he did stuff that didn't allow him to be in the building when I arrived, there were cards and gift bags that could go home and Mom could pick up with homework. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to go to the school and to do what I'm here to do. And I don't know what effect it has long term. I know what the lack of safe, stable adults does in a kid's life. So I'm privileged to be a part of it and look forward to the partnership continuing.
Thank you, Casey. Joel mentioned the Paper Tigers movie earlier, and the success of that school is the unconditional love that that staff has for the children. You can drop an F-bomb in one of their faces, and the teacher will look at them and say, well, I still love you. And that's what these guys are doing. It's really profound. So with that, thank you very much for your attention.